It's good to have you here today. I am James Pennington, the Executive Director of Back Bay Mission, and this is from my desk, although we're in front of my window again. And I'm here with another fantastic clergy person. So I'm really excited to introduce Emily to you all and have her share a little bit about herself and what brings her here and what makes her tick and what she's passionate about. So Emily, welcome to Back Bay. This is your first time second time on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, right?
Yes, but first time at Back Bay.
Okay. And where were you here before?
I truly cannot remember.
But somewhere on the coast.
I was on the coast. It was after Katrina hit. I came down with college ministry, but I can't remember where.
How long were you here?
For fall break, so 4 days probably.
What college ministry?
Through the chaplain's office at the University of Evansville.
Oh, yeah. Cool. That's where you went to school?
Yes.
4 years?
Yes.
And then?
And then to Duke Divinity School, and then a little detour in Iowa while my husband had a postdoc, and then we moved to Evansville, and I started at Bethlehem United Church of Christ in Evansville about 8.5 years ago, but I've been in the senior role for about 3 years.
So you're a very young senior minister.
Well, thank you.
And we have something in common that I didn't share with you. So when I was ordained Lutheran originally, I was a really young senior minister too, because I went to Wayne, Nebraska to start a campus ministry out of a very large church with 3 clergy. And we got the campus ministry started, and then in about 3 years the lead pastor, senior pastor, left. And they asked me to step up into that position, which I said no 5 times and finally did. But then I was gone in a year because I took a full-time campus ministry position in Lincoln, Nebraska, because at that point, like, campus ministry was really kind of where my heart was at. Kind of when I got into that lead role, I'm like, this is so much administrative. And then I was managing 3 other clergy and multiple staff. It kind of wasn't my shtick.
Okay.
And then I went to the not-for-profit world after that.
I was going to say, have a little bit of a staff here.
Oh, how many staff do we have? I think we have 19.
So you've found your footing managing staff at some point.
We could ask. We could ask the staff. Part of my, I'm supposed to interview you.
Oh, sorry.
But part of my philosophy, I think, around management is, I don't want to micromanage. We talk about macro managing, right? I don't want to micromanage, but I also want to empower people, be the best employee they can be, do the best job, especially here with the kind of work we do. It's exhausting, but I feel like I'm here. I sense that I'm here more to support them as much as I can and to encourage them to do the work. Not so much manage them, because most of them know their job really well. They know their work really well. They realize this is service to humanity, and they have passion around that.
That's great.
So, and we've kind of come out of that. We came out of that UCC tradition 100 years ago where it was all about service to the fisher people, to the migrants, immigrants, right? Mm-hmm. And so we continue that work. So tell us a little bit about your church back in Evansville.
Yeah, well, we're actually here as part of our association, sent our mission team down. So I represent Bethlehem, but I also represent our Evansville Tri-State Association, which has had a long-standing relationship with Back Bay. And
Tri-State is Indiana.
Yes, Kentucky and Illinois.
Illinois.
Yeah.
Southern Illinois?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Really, John and Pam Small, Bill Gilbert, who's no longer with us, but I shouldn't mention names because I'll miss them, but lots of folks who have been really committed to down here and have been on me to come for many years, and so this year it worked out, and I'm excited to be here.
And what did they share with you? How were they trying to compel you to come down to Back Bay?
I think their love for the mission in general, but I think that particularly the relationships they've built with homeowners that they've worked with over the years has been really meaningful to them, and it's been fun to be down here and see the pride and joy they have in showing me what it is that they love about this place. Yeah.
That is kind of cool, because since I've been here only a little over a year and a half, there have been some clergy that have come with their groups that are new to Back Bay, that weren't familiar with Back Bay, and you're right. There's a lot of joy and excitement to be able to share that. Like, I can't tell you how many people were like, you got to meet our Pastor Emily. We're excited she's here for the first time. And she's a fantastic preacher, and really about justice and equity. So tell us a little bit about what you enjoy the most about ministry.
Yeah, well, I think for me, the sort of actually, to be honest, I love ministry all the way around, and that always ends up sounding really like I'm just trying to butter up the church. But there's not much of it that I don't just really relish, which is hard because then I kind of want to be everywhere and involved in everything. But I think that what kind of drives me is like to my core believe that we are really meant to do the things that Jesus tells us to do. And that seems so simple, but I think sometimes the church can get distracted and think, well, this is what we talk about on Sunday. But then we go back into the world and, you know,
Right.
the real world doesn't operate that way. And no, it doesn't. But I want to wrestle with what does it mean to take seriously that we aspire to believe and live into these things out. They are hard. The things that Jesus asks of us, what it means to follow Jesus, is not as simple as some might want us to. When you give lip service to it, it sounds really simple. But when you really dig down and say, well, what does it mean to sell your possessions and give to the poor? Well, we're not doing that. What does it mean to, really, understand that to be last is to be first, and to be first is. I mean, what does it mean to really wrestle with those things and take them seriously?
Right.
And even if we can't accomplish those things, because I don't think there's ever an arrival like, oh, hey, look, we're now following Jesus perfectly.
Yeah.
Man, that should always be what drives us. We should always be trying to align ourselves more and more with that, rather than kind of say, okay, this is what we're willing to do, and the real world demands some other things of us, and let's just be reasonable here. We can't actually do
Right.
some of the things Jesus says.
That's interesting you say that, because I think, in my perspective, when I look, and I just had this conversation with somebody, actually, it might have been Kevin, actually, behind the camera, about, like, the first book of the Bible, Mark, written for very first book, right? It's kind of simple, it's kind of basic, kind of gives you, hey, this is who Jesus is, and Jesus was. And like you said, there's this call to action, and a call to simplicity, and a call to think about the other. And when I think about all of these, well, right now we're moving into the holidays, right? I think about the holidays, and I think about, the whole story around Jesus. I mean, we make this beautiful, magical story about a baby, but yet we don't seem to want to emphasize the fact that this baby was born homeless in a barn, parents that were fleeing violence, as the story goes, right? And
Unwed mother.
Yes, unwed mother, a dad who says, okay, I guess I'll take care of this unwed mother. I mean, it's this very raw story, and yet we make it so sentimental and so polished. And I think about that. One of my favorite stories about Jesus is like, so we're talking about in the upper room, or whatever room they were in, right? And Jesus is sharing the Last Supper, and he wraps a towel around his waist, and he goes and washes the feet of the disciples. I mean, teachers, rabbis, executive directors don't do that kind of stuff.
Right.
But Jesus stooped down, washed their feet, and like, hey, don't wash my feet, but unless I do this. So there's this like all these acts of humility and being one with people and one with the other, and talking to a woman at the well who probably shouldn't be at the well at that time of day, and because she probably was in the wrong place, or was probably ostracized from her own community. Who knows, right?
Right.
We create these stories around them, but if we create the stories and we look at the reality and we say that this was a change maker, and this is somebody who lived as a homeless, brown-skinned, wandering Jewish teacher, kind of like a guru.
Well, and I think it's interesting that the church, most traditions have retained the Last Supper, but when Jesus says, likewise, you should wash one another's feet, we've let that go. I mean, that's personal, that's intimate, I mean, that's not something we're doing on Maundy, Thursday in our churches. But give me a little bit of juice and I can do that kind of, I don't know, it's just interesting.
We did.
Yeah?
At the church back in Phoenix, I finally was like, okay, pull the trigger on this one, right? Bad use of words, I realize. But,
how'd it go?
Is on Monday, Thursday, we created a room, a space in our hall that was really intimate, and we actually washed feet.
Yeah.
Now, we gave people an option. You can wash hands if you don't want to wash feet, but the majority of people wash feet. And honestly, people were just kind of tearing up because it was such a beautiful moment, and we had some homeless people that joined us with terrible feet. We think our feet are bad. Somebody that's been homeless has some of the rough, most calloused, dirty, cracked feet ever. And I saw some of the leaders in my church wash their feet. And there was such a beauty in that. And it's And did it create some change for them? Did it transform them on some levels? Yeah. But to me, that's the, you see Jesus as kind of get down and dirty kind of guy.
Well, and it takes a lot to let somebody wash your feet. I mean,
that too, right?
I mean, I almost think that, I think I'd have an easier time, certainly. I mean, I'm with Peter. Like, okay, I'll wash feet, but don't you wash my feet. Yeah.
And there were people that were like, oh, I don't want to take off my shoes and let you wash my feet.
Yeah.
And after they saw the examples,
Yeah.
not everybody did, right? And I'd have to say, yeah, that was uncomfortable for me as the pastor to have my feet washed by somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But some people were coming through multiple times because it was such an intimate moment for them, right? And actually, I had a great guy that was kind of doing some nonviolence work in the community, played the Jesus that night anyway. So I got to be kind of, on the side, and we reenacted it, and it was strangely powerful, but it took time to get there. You never know, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of your passions?
I really like to teach. I really feel like there's a lot of ways to do good in the world, and as Christians, we have a specific way of doing good, and if we're not tethered to the story that informs our faith, I think we quickly just kind of become do-gooders, which is great. We need as much good in this world as we can, but we have something, I think, specific to offer, and I feel like we need to be tied to remembering our why, and back to, we're taking seriously what Jesus said, and Jesus was taking seriously the God of Israel and the call on his life. And so right now I'm teaching a class called a refresh class, which is a confirmation class for adults, and I'm having a lot of fun doing that.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, to me it was really curious when you said we're tethered to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Say more about that.
Yeah, well, I think there's such a misunderstanding about how the Bible, what the Bible is,
You think?
Right. I mean, this is a hard question. The Bible, it's important that the Bible can be in anyone's hands and that it's translated into every language under the sun. But it is not an easy book to read. It is not an easy book to understand.
Right.
And for too long, the church has sort of pitched it as like, this is your guide to life, or this is, a Hallmark card that's always got a message for you, right? And so people go to it with the wrong questions to begin with. And then, it can be a real struggle to understand, well, what am I doing with this? What is this saying to me? My preference is to find, to really get that whole arc of the story of a God who continues to reach and continues to reach and continues to reach and is patient with people who just don't get it over and over and over again, and to see that overarching story of being in the wilderness and then being brought out of the wilderness and back to the wilderness, and we find ourselves in the wilderness, and find kind of I always like to sort of use the example of people who are like a real Star Wars nerds or like real Harry Potter nerds, and like can almost like they can write fan fiction and they can get in that world. Like that's what I want for people in my church, is to be able to feel like they are so saturated in the story of Israel, the story of Israel that comes to us both in the history of Israel but also through the life and ministry and death and resurrection of Jesus, that they're so habituated in that they're able to apply what they know from that story to the situations that we find ourselves in, because the Bible doesn't speak to so many things that we have to face today, but we can learn how to think. I think we can learn how to think like Jesus, and so that when we encounter new challenges, it's not a matter of being like, okay, where's the chapter and verse that tells me what to do? It's a matter of knowing Jesus and how Jesus loved and lived well enough that we can make a pretty good educated guess on what to do with humility, because we won't always get it right.
So is it Paul that said put on the mind of Christ?
I think that's
It's
right.
kind of what you're talking about. It's like think
Yeah.
like Jesus, walk like Jesus, act like Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Take on. Because my perspective is always well, for the most part, I would say, especially the last few years, has been we're kind of in the hands and feet of Christ in the world, and we are Jesus with flesh on to those around us. We could be. I don't know. I don't want to say a should, but we could be. We can be, right? I don't want to should anybody, but I think it's that. Yeah, it's really a beautiful perspective, actually.
But at the same time, the people you serve are Jesus to you. Which
Oh
is what
my
Jesus
gosh,
has told
totally.
us, right? So it's kind of
Totally.
mind-bending. Like, we're aspiring to be Jesus, but we're also humble enough to recognize that first of all,
Yeah.
we're not.
Yeah.
And secondly, that in fact, we're challenged to meet Jesus in
Yeah, in the other.
the people who the world would say
Yeah.
may not have a lot to offer.
Yeah. Well, and I don't always like to pull this out, but there's that one particular passage, where Jesus is saying, when did I see you hungry? When did I see you thirsty? When did I see you naked? Without a home. And you do it to the least of these, my brothers and sisters. That to me, it's finding. Because I find, since I've taken this role on as an executive director, especially with a not-for-profit that serves the unsheltered and the poor, to be very honest, and hope I don't offend church folk, but I see a lot more Jesus here than I did in the pews, and that sounds judgy, but it's just that sometimes I think, like what you said, that immersion in the Jesus story and kind of the Jesus way of being and living, I think sometimes we put so much on that book and we put so much on being right, or having our theology straight, or whatever it is we're trying to do, or I need to understand this. I don't know if you need to understand, it's just living into it, right? And so I have to say that in many ways I see a lot more Jesus around our campus than I did in the pews of my church. Because sometimes the more you have, the harder it is to...
Yeah, it can become a barrier. I mean, we try to build up a life that makes things easier for us, but then we kind of blind ourselves to where Jesus said he'd be.
Yeah, you're right.
So, it shouldn't surprise us, but I think for me anyway, it surprises me to find that the way that we can draw closest to God is to draw close to those who Jesus would have said are the least of these, and then we're surprised by it, which we shouldn't be because it's right there.
And surprised on one hand that Jesus would say the least of these, but yet that's kind of, I don't think Jesus meant it in a demeaning way, but just to say, hey, wake up, folks. Especially if you're talking to religious leaders or people that think they got it put together, right?
Right.
It's like, no, recognize me in the people that you are just a surprise. And sometimes the surprise is the other way around, too. Last night we were in Gulfport, meeting with folks about our capital campaign, and this was a group of wealthy folks. But I could see a presence of Jesus in a couple of the folks, especially as they were talking about their perspective and their concerns and how they look at this issue of homelessness and poverty, right? And one that was a school teacher and teaches in a school that is pretty poor here on the coast. And you could, with them, I could also see, right, their compassion and their eyes being open to what they saw around them and the kind of change they want to bring in the world.
Yeah, and I may be taking this too far, but I think
Go ahead.
Any one of us...
That's why we're on camera.
Right,
Take
great,
it far.
great. No pressure. Any one of us can be the least of these. It's a matter of what it is that you're lacking, and I think your comment about, sometimes, I think you said this, that sometimes wealth, the things that we have, can impede kind of our awareness of God's presence and those kind of things. So I think that least of these, yes, I see what you're saying. We shouldn't take it to be Jesus demeaning people, but I think it's also recognizing sometimes I need someone to reach out to me or to get me back on the right track or to help me or to give me a hand. I mean, however you want to say it.
Well, I know because I've kind of been where you're at, so I'm not saying anything new. Right? Is that being kind of a spiritual leader, a clergy, a spiritual religious type, right, can be really hard because you can get drained. And if we don't get ourselves filled up, we don't get ourselves energized, sometimes we need somebody to come along and be that compassion and mercy for us, right?
Yeah.
Because not everything in the world is win-win, So I think it's really powerful. What has been really transformative for you here? You've just been here a day, right? Right. What have you sensed? How have you sensed like the Spirit at work in you, or how have you been seeing Jesus, or how have you been seeing God in the spaces and places around you? Yeah.
Well, I haven't been here that long, but I think I remember as a kid, like we'd go to Disney World and we would come home and I'd be like, man, Disney World's still there. Like there's still people there, riding rides and staying in hotels. And I think for me, like coming to a place like this where you see all the things that are happening and realize that I'm going to see this for the next 4 days and I'm going to get to be a part of it. I'm going to get to help out where I can and learn a lot. But knowing that we're going to go home and you guys are going to be here and still serving these important ministries, serving these important roles in this community. Like, that to me is, I mean, that every day. I mean, that is just really impactful to me, and it makes you feel good about supporting this ministry, because I've seen it with my own eyes what you're doing, and to know that that's happening all the time. I don't know.
Yeah, and kind of, I think that's one of the questions, that we get. Why come to Back Bay Mission, or why be a part of this when there's needs in my own community? Sometimes you need to get out of what's comfortable. You need to get out of your particular space and place and time, and just immerse yourself, right? I think one of the UCC, and it might be our current theme right now, is immerse yourself, right? And immersing ourselves in community, immersing ourselves in poverty and homelessness, in kind of throwing some nails and hammers and cleaning some showers and working in a food pantry can help regulate and kind of put you back, right? And kind of tune you up. So I think that's really important work. And you folks have been coming down here for a long time. Like, I know we've got two sets of couples that are long-term volunteers that are very cherished. When John and Pam arrive, everybody's hooting and hollering, and and Bob and Nancy, they really appreciate who they are and what they bring to Back Bay Mission. And that's a pretty cool thing when you think about it, because we're separated by quite a few miles, a state or two, but yet we have this connection. So. Well,
I apologize to keep bringing it back to Jesus, but Jesus did explode the idea of neighbor. Who's my neighbor?
You think?
It's like, well, who's your neighbor? Whoever you're being neighborly to.
Yeah. I think Jesus throws out the question. It's like, well, who isn't your neighbor then?
Right. So,
right.
Yeah. And,
yeah. I know, that's really true. Thank you. I honestly never thought that in the context of the work that we do with all these great folks that come down. It's like they're coming down to work with their neighbors, because we're neighbors across the globe, right? And on this whirling planet in which we live.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good. So any other thoughts that you want to share? What are some of your other passions?
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm out. I got no more.
You got no more?
I got a great family. I got 3 little kids.
That's cool.
That's
right? How old are your kids?
12. I guess I don't know if I can say they're little still. 12, 9, and 6. And so really one of my passions is making sure that their experience of Christian education is what their mother wants it to be.
Yeah, right.
And it sounds a little controlling, but I like being confident that what the faith formation they're getting is in line with my husband and my values and how we understand this story. And they, of course, will be free to take it up or leave it behind as they make those decisions for themselves. But knowing that we're trying to live out in word and deed what our values are, and put that on display for them, and hope that they'll at least take that with them wherever life takes them. So.
That's beautiful. Did you grow up in the United Church of Christ?
That's complicated. I grew up American Baptist, but my dad's family, and my dad is actually being ordained on Sunday. He's a lawyer turned UCC pastor.
Are you going to be there for it?
Yes, I'm getting home in time for it. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So
of course you are.
And I'm going to get to be a part of that, which is really cool. But my dad's family, my dad was born the year the UCC became the UCC. Yes. And so my dad's family is all part of St. Paul's German Township in Evansville, Indiana. My great-grandparents and my grandfather are buried in the churchyard. So my maternal grandfather was a Baptist minister, so when my parents got married, my mom won that one, and so we grew up in the American Baptist churches. That's where I was ordained, and then I got dual standing when I moved back to Evansville. And so now I always think it would be funny, maybe, I don't know, what kind of funny, but to know what both of my grandfathers thought about this, that after all this time, both my dad and I are pastors in the United Church of Christ, after having been in the Baptist church for so many years. So.
Well, interesting you say that. After I left the Lutheran Church, a little bit disturbed by heavy doctrine and theology, which wasn't fitting for me anymore, right? And kind of a more fundamentalist way of looking at things. And I went into the not-for-profit world. I spent some time kind of playing agnostic and atheist, depending upon the day. And then I was the executive director of the LGBT Center in Milwaukee and we were going through the battle on marriage and civil union.
Okay.
And so I was the faith table organizer. I kind of stepped down half-time doing that and half-time executive director responsibilities. And I had Jamie Walsham, pastor of an American Baptist church in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, that was our only Baptist representative on our clergy, group of clergy that were supporting marriage equality.
Okay.
And I was like, oh my gosh, she's a Baptist, what's she doing here? And she was beautiful. She was really on the edge, her clothing, her dress, her look, right? And so anyway, after the third meeting, our third round table where we had clergy, we had about 100 clergy involved to say, you know, marriage equality, it's a faith issue, right? And we're supporting it as clergy. I asked her to speak at one of our gatherings, and she did. And then she came up to me afterwards and says, James, I have a request of you. I want you to speak at our church. And I'm like, oh, no. I'm not really having much to do with the church right now. You know, I've kind of been burned by the church, especially as a queer male. Anyway, so she said, no, I want you to come and share the message. And I said, okay, what do you want me to talk about? Well, you were running a shelter for homeless, runaway, throwaway youth previously, so I want you to talk about that. And then I want you to talk about homelessness and talk about the LGBT community and feeling homeless at times without a church community, a faith community, right? Pull it all together for me, and I'm like, oh, geez, great. And I said, do you have any particular scripture? And she said, well, the scripture coming up in the rotation is the prodigal son. And I have to say, I was like, oh, darn it, this is going to be a watershed moment, right? So I wrote this sermon and gave it my all, right? In this American Baptist church in Wauwatosa that had a rainbow flag on their sign, and my partner and I were like, this cannot be, right? So I didn't know anything about the American Baptist. I knew about Lutherans, right? Because I was ordained Lutheran, and it was very insular. And I got done, and I went in the back, and I just bawled my head off. Because I was like, okay, so the call never lifted. So where is God? God's always been here. I'm the one that's kind of taken the hiatus from God, right? And so it was an American Baptist church and Jamie Walsham that was really instrumental in bringing me back.
Oh, that's really neat.
And then I kind of waffled between the American Baptist and UCC, having my ordination recognized as I was leaving the LGBT community center as ED, and felt that call back in. And so it was UCC. It was a UCC church up in Minneapolis that needed a restart. So Jamie Walsham, to this day, we're in touch. You know, we stay in touch, and she's kind of got me right here, right?
That's really neat.
And I've got her there because she's awesome, and she just, yeah. And then she continued to kind of mentor me. I sat down with her weekly, and we talked and we prayed, and yeah, it was beautiful.
That's great.
So, Wuhan American Baptist.
Right. Those overlaps.
I know, isn't it funny? It
So
really
well.
is, yeah. And congratulations or blessings for your father. What a great thing, you know,
really
to be able to celebrate that with your dad. And he is going to give some awesome sermons because he's a lawyer. Either he's going to go way up here, or he's going to be able to just like convince the heck out of people, right?
So he's been serving as a licensed minister there for several years.
Really?
So he's
Wow.
but it is funny. We always joke because I am a manuscript preacher.
Yeah.
I mean, I like my words the way I like them. I want to get them just right.
Me
and
too,
my
and I
dad,
practice them. So
yes,
I
I
know,
want
I
to
hear you
deliver
gotta
it
have that
just
there.
this way. And my
Yeah.
dad's like, okay, my 3 points, I got them. And I'm like,
right.
all those years in the courtroom, I think, but I couldn't. I couldn't do that way.
Oh, it's got to be interesting. I've got to get up there and hear both of you do your thing. That's cool. Well, thank you for this time. I really appreciate it. And
I don't know if you're actually reaching for a handshake there.
I
But
was.
It seemed
Yeah,
right.
that worked.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
I just appreciate you and what you've brought and the community you've brought, right? I know that has been doing this work for a long time, and for them kind of bringing you into this place and space. I feel like I'm honored to kind of be here because I never expected to be back in Mississippi, although Mississippi's home, right? But the exciting thing for me is being kind of in the cradle of what I see as the civil rights movement. The place, it's sacred. This is sacred ground. And it's sacred ground for the next movement, I think. So, you know, our movement for equity and justice as we try to speak truth to power. So thank you for your time, Emily.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for
You
having
bet.
me.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we hope you have a really beautiful, fruitful day. Go be the hands and feet of Jesus in the world, and really find God and Jesus in others, right?
Right.
Recognize it. So thank you for joining us.